thank you all for joining today's event, 5G Roaming, Operator Attitudes, Readiness and Best Practices for 2023. As always here at Kaleido, we have, I would say, an insight-heavy webinar for you today. So we hope it's going to be really informative for you, sharing a lot of new insight from our ongoing research and also hearing from those at the forefront of the industry, of the roaming industry, to really add some expertise from the ground, which will ultimately help us as we enable the industry to continue to progress. So we have, as I mentioned, there's quite a bit that we have to go through today, and in a minute or two, we shall share and have a recap of the agenda that we're going through. But firstly, let's welcome the speakers that we have for today, which includes Sue Panyapu, who's Senior Manager of Roaming Strategy at T-Mobile. We have Mike Stewart, VP of Product Management at Cineverse, Nitin Bass, Chief of Strategy and Insights at Kaleido, Marco Hoffman, Senior Roaming Manager at Swisscom, and Tandria Alfonso, Managing Director of Telefonica Global Roaming. It's fantastic to have you all here, and I know we'll hear from you more later on during this session. But why don't you come off mute quickly and say a quick hello and a quick introduction to your roles. If we go column by column, by how we see things on the screen, Sue, let's start with yourself.
Everyone, this is Sue Panyapu from T-Mobile, Senior Manager, Roaming Products and Strategy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Mike Stewart, VP Product Management. I guess you could call me an industry veteran. I've actually lived and worked through pretty much every cellular technology evolution since the industry has been out there. So it's really exciting to see yet another technology evolution, and looking forward to today's working panel. Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Nitin Bass. I'm one of the chief analysts here at Kaleido. My primary focus of research is in the areas of mobile roaming, international travel, and wholesale market strategy. So yeah, I'm also the author of the white paper that Cineverse and Kaleido will publish shortly following the webinar. So yeah, excited, looking forward to sharing some of the key findings from the survey as well as the white paper today with you guys. So yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, this is Marco Hoffman from Swisscom. My main responsibilities as a roaming manager are the commercial negotiations, but also VoLTE and BC, and of course 5G are upcoming topics, and I'm looking forward to exchange with you.
Hi everyone, this is Tandria Enrique from Telefonica Global Roaming. I'm the Managing Director of this entity of Telefonica. We're taking care of the wholesale roaming negotiations of the Telefonica Group operators. So nice to meet you.
Thanks, Tandria. And I myself, so I'm John King, Chief Commercial Officer here from Kaleido Intelligence as well. So thank you all to our panelists for your introductions, and looking forward to hearing what you have to share later on in this session. So we're going to do a quick recap now of the agenda. So as you might have guessed, today's session is all geared around 5G roaming, and I think really how the operator community should be preparing for those rollouts, and especially 5G SA rollouts, but also aligning that with the wider roaming strategy. Now, naturally, being a research house dedicated in roaming, this is an area that we are constantly doing research studies into. And on today's webinar, we will be presenting new findings from you from an industry survey undertaken by operators that was concluded in January this year. So very fresh insights, which I will share more on in just a moment. So Nitin will share those from Kaleido's side. We'll then move into a panel session where we'll be discussing a lot of, I would say, the pertinent issues, from an operator perspective, really, pertaining to the best way to go about optimizing our 5G roaming strategy. And then we'll be wrapping up after that with, trying to address any audience Q&A from your side as well. Now, whilst we're on that topic, We do want to hear from you today, and I'm sure that as we present the insights and as the panelists share, there will be a lot of triggers and questions that you'll probably want to dig deeper into, and we want to hear all of that from you as we go. This is about progressing as an industry as a whole. So in order to do this, in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a Q&A section. So just expand on that section, and then please type your questions in to all panelists, and we will do our utmost to address those during the time that we have with you today. And if we aren't able to get to them live, we will most certainly be following up on them immediately after the webinar with you as well. Okay, so let us now move on to the first section of actually looking at the new insights that we are presenting with you today. So as I mentioned, Kaleido is constantly doing research in this sector with the aim of helping enabling the industry to move forward as a whole. So what we're about to share with you are findings from that research, in which over 100 operators, as you can see, spread fairly evenly around the world, were taking part in our most recent operator survey. So again, this concluded in January this year. So very fresh insights, which I think are very relevant for us as we're looking towards our roadmap for 2023 and beyond, being able to base that on our perceptions and awareness as things stand as of today. So what we'll be going through and Nitin will be presenting is a lot of new insight from that pertaining to the drivers, perceived opportunities, technical requirements, use cases, all centered around 5G roaming. Now, a reminder that if you are with us today or indeed have registered for this webinar, then the findings from that survey combined with some additional analysis from Kaleido are available today in a new industry white paper. Those of you with us live, you will be the first to get your hands on that. And I think I see a link already that the white paper is now live to be downloaded. So following this webinar, you will receive a download link as well where you can access that white paper. And of course, this webinar recording will be available in a replay as well. Okay, so now let us move on to the first section to go through these survey insights. So it's my pleasure to hand over to Nitin to lead us on. Over to you, Nitin.
Thanks, John. Great. As John mentioned, the white paper will provide you with a much wider coverage on the survey that we conducted, and we do have a wonderful panel lined up today. So I'll be presenting just a few takeaways from the white paper to begin with. So we are able to dedicate a lot more of your valuable time listening to all the experts today. Okay, so let's just set the fundamental base for our 5G roaming discussion today. So if you look at the end of Jan 2023, we're counting more than 240 mobile operators in nearly 100 countries around the world who have launched 5G domestic services. And we're looking at more than 100 operators in around 50 countries investing in 5G standalone networks. Now, we are estimating just over 30 domestic 5G standalone commercial launches in over 20 markets. Now, we are expecting another 20 to 25 launches 5G standalone domestic launches over the next 12 to 18 months. Now, the adoption of these 5G services across not just consumer, but also business verticals will drive the total number of 5G consumer and IoT connections to over 6 billion by 2027. As I mentioned, this kind of forms the base for our discussion today. Now, as you understand, our discussion is around 5G roaming, and from a 5G roaming perspective, what this essentially means is that the operators around the world have an opportunity to innovate and deliver new, I would say, smarter consumer and enterprise-focused data services. So we've said this in the past that 5G roaming or 5G is not about enabling faster but broadband connectivity for roaming consumers, but also enabling those low latency services or massive machine type communication services. Now, if you're talking about 5G roaming, it's predominantly rolled out on a non-standalone mode as of now, and it's available in over 60 country markets, according to our recent estimates. But from a standalone perspective, the first set of launches are, or is rather expected in 2023. Now, if you're looking at the chart on your screen, we can see that over 50% of the 100 plus operators who took part in our survey expects to launch 5G standalone roaming by the end of 2024. Now, when you compare this with 5G non-standalone roaming, we are seeing an increasing number of mobile operators rolling this out and will continue to do so in 2023. And by 2024, we expect 70%, or as suggested by the survey, nearly 70% expect to have 5G non-standalone roaming agreements in place. Now, unsurprisingly, what we also found from the survey was that around 85% of the operators who are in the process of or planning to launch 5G standalone roaming, they are in the process of conducting or completing testing, especially with regards to the new protocols and new functional entities that comes along with 5G standalone. For example, we'll discuss this further during the panel session, but 5G introduces a new signaling protocol, or HTTP2, to replace diameter, and operators around who are in the process of launching 5G standalone roaming are in the process of conducting or completing testing of these protocols. At the same time, I think around 60% plus of participating operators are prioritizing testing and trialing of new security and network functions, including SEP. Now, we'll discuss more about SEP later on, but as a fundamental part of 5G standalone roaming, SEP is one of the key enablers for end-to-end security in 5G. So alongside these plans to launch 5G non-standalone and 5G standalone roaming, we are seeing mobile operators actively planning to conduct these tests and trials of these services. Now, moving on to the next slide, really quickly to touch upon the use cases and the application, the kind of applications that 5G roaming will enable. This is something that it's always at the forefront of discussion points with roaming teams around the world, as well as the planning teams. It's, as I mentioned earlier on, it's not about consumer faster broadband connectivity and for consumers. It's also about extending connections to M2M and IoT devices overseas. Now, in terms of international IoT roaming services, as per our research, there is clearly a demand for automotive or vehicle applications, industrial services, and healthcare applications. Now, low latency services from a consumer point of view, if you're looking at VR and AR applications from a roaming perspective, these are still at a very early phase of adoption. But as you can see from the chart, operators expect low latency and high density connectivity application to be the primary revenue drivers. Now, as I mentioned, the market for 5G IoT is still in its relative infancy. This is mainly because for many of such applications, the bandwidth offered by 3G or 4G or the low power wide area networks is sufficient for their requirements. So from a 5G roaming perspective, from an IoT perspective, it enables the scaling up to potentially billions of connected devices, and then you bring in network slicing where it's tailored to the requirements of use cases, be it a high data rate, low latency, or in the case of, for example, agricultural sensors, low data, low energy. So these are interesting to see several industry verticals outside the consumer application representing an opportunity or a potential, representing significant potential for service providers and mobile operators around the world. So there's a lot more to discuss here. I will come back to this at a later stage during the panel session. Now, moving on to the next slide. So we all understand 5G domestic adoption amongst consumers is much faster than 4G across almost all global markets, and we believe it will continue to witness significant growth in 2023. But from a roaming perspective, there still exist a number of challenges that operators need to address. And as you can see from the chart, testing of 5G roaming remained the biggest challenge for mobile operators. One interesting thing to mention here is that the operator attitudes towards these challenges or the requirements or the technical requirements of the primary drivers in terms of 5G roaming continue to evolve. I don't want to use the word fluctuate because evolving is a better phrase to use here, because if I draw parallels with our 2022 5G roaming survey, I think the topmost priority was negotiating 5G roaming agreements, getting those 5G non-standalone roaming agreements in place, and upgrading to a service-based core network were found to be the top two challenges, or rather MNO requirements. And in this year's survey, operators noted testing as well as launching those new 5G roaming functions as the most important challenge or immediate requirement to address. Now, moving on to the next slide. So alongside these challenges, I have got two more slides. I'll just wanted to quickly cover the most immediate requirements from a 5G non-standalone versus 5G standalone roaming perspective. The 4G to 5G transition, the basic fundamentals required to realize the migration towards 5G standalone is something we will shortly discuss with our panel. But when operators are planning to launch 5G roaming on a NSA network mode, they are using 4G LTE technology as a stepping stone, as we note in our white paper. And this just means that the operators are using their current infrastructure as well as the IPX and diameter signaling. So then the requirements suddenly become the need for increased capacity, rolling out those agreements, and then enhanced diameter signaling services and mediation services. This will also require testing and troubleshooting that will enable a successful commercial launches of 5G non-standalone roaming now. Now, testing keeps coming up across the board and across all our surveys that we've been conducting over the last 12 months. And it's interesting to see and quite exciting, and it's good for the industry as well to see that VoLTE roaming continue to be at the forefront of operator strategies over the last 12 months. Another thing that we continue to see is the security capabilities, how it's critical for 5G roaming success, and it must be at the forefront of any 5G roaming roadmap. So you're looking at an influx of 5G connections, so connected devices, which will then increase the growth of signaling on a massive scale. So which means that alongside all these, there is a need to address these increase in signaling transactions and how to manage them as well. So that's from a 5G non-standalone perspective. So moving on to the next slide, where we are going to look at 5G standalone roaming. Okay, the top most important thing was testing new 5G standalone roaming functions. And here we're looking at SAP or BSF, binding support functions, SEP, I mentioned SEP at the start, and then enabling VoLTE roaming. These were the top two most important requirements from MNOs in 2023. Now, there's a wide range of services that will be enabled by 5G standalone roaming, and all these use cases will have various characteristics, various needs, various features and functionalities, which means they will require specific policies to be applied. So policy control and management is critical. Again, a point that we will discuss quite shortly with the panel. And when it comes to VoLTE roaming, we did conduct a VoLTE roaming survey a few months ago, last year, where it was found that global 2G, 3G network sunset strategies, or the increasing announcement of shutdowns around the world, is kind of having a positive impact on operator strategies. I think we noticed around 70% of the participating operators. I think we surveyed around 98 operators for the VoLTE roaming survey, and around 69 to 70% of the operators respondents confirmed that they do see this as a positive impact and they will accelerate their VoLTE roaming rollout. So again, great news for the industry. So on that note, I will stop. As I mentioned earlier on, there are a lot more survey findings that's available, which we have included in the white paper. So we have 25 to 30 minutes lined up for our next session, our panel session. As John mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat box or the Q&A box. We'll make sure we take them at the end, or if you run out of time, we'll make sure we get back to you shortly after the webinar. So again, the panel session. So our aim today is to identify the key requirements for 5G roaming from an MNO perspective. The best practices to enable 5G roaming services. I mentioned some of the challenges, further understanding those challenges and how to solve them. And we will aim to make some specific recommendations from both vendor and operator viewpoints on how to plan your 5G roaming roadmap. On that note, let me please welcome back Sue, Marco, Mike, and Tandria back online. Guys, please unmute your mics. And thank you once again for joining us. So let's get straight to it. I mentioned at the start that MNOs are following a 4G to 5G NSA roaming and then migrating towards 5G standalone roaming. So kind of taking a phased approach. Sue, let's start with you. Let's start with, what does this mean for mobile operators when they are switching from, let's say, 4G to 5G non-standalone and then to 5G standalone roaming?
Absolutely. The first step of 4G to 5G non-standalone is kind of the easier one, because your core and EPC is the same. You're just changing the RAN. But the non-standalone to standalone is completely, you're rebuilding the core. It's an absolutely a challenging task. It's not impossible, but it just needs long-term, planning and strategy, because standalone only can bring out all the varied use cases that you talked about earlier. Low latency, private 5G networks, supporting those billions of devices for massive connections. So the way operators need to figure out or plan is like how they shut down the network, the legacy networks, at the same time managing the customer experience, the inbound subscribers customer experience. There will be pockets where there's no CSFP. So how do you manage 911 calls? Do you allow data attach only, right? What else? As well, the customer experience, and it has a direct impact on your inbound revenue. So managing P&L, it does impact P&L. So not only you're trying to shut down your legacy networks and move forward with 5G, at the same time, you have a customer experience and P&L to manage. So absolutely challenging task, but I think industry is headed in the right direction from your survey as well. Last year was all about contracts and other stuff, but this year, or even like T-Mobile, for example, we did our standalone in 2020 and 2022, we did 5G VoNR call rollout plan. So you have to plan like way ahead. And I have another slide if we go to the next one. Since these are the building blocks, right? Like the key considerations that operators need to figure out is, when they have the cloud native core built, how are they supporting voice? Are they supporting VoLTE first and then moving on to voice over new radio? Because the quality and performance of voice over new radio has to supersede VoLTE, or even fallback, EPS fallback. So going back top to bottom, then the spectrum. How is your spectrum? How are you planning? This is the fuel for the whole 5G standalone, right? Between low band, mid band, and high band. For us, like we have all the three and covering a lot of all of US, but all the operators need to figure this piece out for their own regions and have that first mover advantage. The devices and spectrum kind of go hand in hand about the ENDC combinations. But as you touched upon the chipsets, you touched on not only retail customers' phones, also the IoT, right? The IoT devices are still in 4G, the chipsets, and they're still evolving towards 5G, but they are not there yet. So when you switch off your legacy networks or you shut down your legacy networks and you're moving towards 5G, how do you support that line of business? Right. So multiple moving things in this ecosystem, and security in terms of SEP that you also touched about. At least from the industry, we have standards, whether it is hosted SEP or it is outsourced, but you're outsourced and still within your domain. These are the approved, these are being tested between operators and operators, and alongside our industry partners, vendors, helping us, test with multiple operators. So we're learning a lot, facing some challenges, but definitely moving in the right direction. And all the operators also need to figure out their own edge computing and whom do they partner on the cloud, right? That is another for all the low latency, it needs to be closer to the user experience, the edge computing. So that's another. The charging. So BCE, I would say BCE is not only, like the first version 1.4 is already available from the industry. And, we started like planning, just educating cross-functional teams. It takes so much time. It's completely a new billing paradigm shift along with that. So making a business case and then figuring out, do you want to build or buy, and do you want to buy and deploy the 1.4 version, or there are major features that are coming up in 2.0, that's end of this year. So a lot of movement within the industry with the operators while they're testing standardization across security, standardization across charging principles. A lot is coming, and I feel like things are moving in the right direction for operators, as well as integration with the IT, API development and Project Kamara. Yeah, things are coming.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you mentioned, it's moving ahead, and it's all about striking the right balance between all these elements while you're progressing towards 5G standalone. Thanks, Sue. And I think alongside these fundamentals, it's interesting, or it's important rather, to discuss the critical challenges. I think in our survey, and I highlighted this earlier, testing, security. So you mentioned how to, the different roaming VAS scenarios. There are critical challenges for MNOs. Let's bring Mike in here. Mike, maybe you could touch upon some of the key critical challenges that operators need to take into consideration.
If you could jump to the slide there.
You have some slides too. Yeah.
Yeah, just one more slide. Thank you. I think Sue really brought up some great points. This is a journey that we're going on, and it's not unlike previous technology journeys. When wireless first started out, this was pre 3G, pre GSM. We had different radios, we had different technologies, and through the years, we've really moved into technologies that have expanded the capability to the user. And with 5G, I think, with this technology migration, there's really a bigger paradigm shift that we've ever seen. With from 3G to 4G, we did have some changes in the core network as well as the signaling protocol. But essentially, it was almost just a very logical change from one protocol to another. For pretty much the voice solutions were originally circuit switched, and now we introduced VoLTE, and now with 5G, we've got VoLTE over New Radio. Again, all IMS-based technologies for VoLTE and Vonner. But with 5G, what we're really introducing is a whole paradigm shift on how we're going to manage that infrastructure. And there's, as we'll walk through this, you'll start seeing the additional layer of complexities that we're dealing with as we roll into 5G core networking and associated roaming services. One of the biggest issues, and I put this high on the list for our operator community, is monetization. You know, if you really look at where we are today with 5G, all we've really done for the most part is upgrade the radio access network, right? We've got some new handsets out there. We've upgraded the radio access network, and for good reason, we focused in that area first, right? We didn't start with the core. We started with the radio access network because that's solving a critical challenge that many operators had, and that was coverage and density. By opening up the radio access network, in many ways, the density issue, where we may have high consumption and overutilization of access points in the 4G network, the 5G radio access network helps take care of that. But really, that's kind of step one, okay? And operators continue to expand that that radio access network because that represents coverage. But then as we look at, okay, so we've got a radio access network that is 5G technology. We can now start looking at deploying all of our voice services over that. But now we need to look at the core and how that's applicable to our next major step, right? And that would be the 5G core. When we look at monetization, it's like, okay, so now we're investing, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars as an industry in this technology, and we need to start monetizing. So we really haven't been able to do that yet, right? Where I think monetization comes in is the second bullet under that topic, which is getting into the enterprise community, getting into expanding IoT applications, because we need to realize that 5G really represents growth not by people and handsets. That growth has already happened, right? We're going to switch out technologies with that customer community. 5G is about the new customer verticals that it creates by enhancing access, by enhancing the applications and the use cases that we can deliver closer to the customer. Sue mentioned machine edge compute, MEC. You'll see that acronym flying around quite a bit. MEC is how we deliver the latency promise of 5G. Without MEC, we can't deliver the low latency promise because distance is the enemy of latency. If we're coming back to a region of a country or a different region of the world, there's latency that cannot be mitigated. When we have MEC, for those critically important applications that require those low latency performance, we can deliver to that because that application, that use case is much closer to the user, which probably is some industrial application, medical application, new vertical outside of what we traditionally consider in the mobile space, to be able to deliver that. So watch MEC very closely and understand what that means for your network. The other one is network slicing. Network slicing is going to give operators the opportunity to provide customized network services well beyond what we've been able to provide in the past. The enterprise side of any mobile operators looking at B2B type experience, that is going to be expanded greatly with network slicing, and it's going to expand the use cases and then get out of the traditional verticals that operators have sold to. We've really talked about growth and penetration to some degree with the radio access network, but what I'm really referring to here is how quickly, once roaming starts, are we able to deploy those new roaming relationships? For those of you who are around for the 4G migration from 3G, think about the time it took to establish all of those 4G roaming relationships. That time to get all of that work done is going to be critical in deploying your penetration from a roaming perspective. And oftentimes operators will need to look at outside resources to help them do that. As far as customer experience, we need to make sure that what we're providing our customers under the 5G title is at least as good, if not better, and noticeably better than what they experience in their older technology. Let's say you buy a new 5G phone, you subscribe to T-Mobile 5G services. It better be good, right? It better be noticeably better or no worse anyway than the service that they got under 4G. Where that comes to play in the testing that we saw in the survey is making sure that before we step off the edge into 5G roaming, we want to make sure that we've got a solid network, we understand the performance attributes, and we have a very solid footing to go into delivering that service to our customers, because we definitely want to make sure that there's an enhanced experience with 5G roaming that they don't experience in the other lower technologies. Now, obviously, that's a two-sided story because you have a roaming partner that is providing that network, and that's why testing and understanding their 5G penetration in their coverage is very important. But we need to make sure we have solid footing, and that's what the testing is all about, is making sure that that's solid. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on security because it is a very important part of our evolution to 5G. Pretty much everything in 5G is encrypted, right? So there's some challenges with delivering value-added services, analytics. Today, a lot of those services are delivered from data we get in transit. That model is going to change somewhat. Some data may be able to be collected in transit if there's a hosted SEP model in play. But also we need to think about what APIs are necessary from our core networks that we control or from core networks that our roaming partners run, and how can we get that data that we need to ensure that we're offering roaming value-added services to our customers, and that we have a way to manage that service delivery and experience because of the change in security and how that needs to be managed. And your security organization also, with regards to the mobile network, is really going to be changed, right? There's a lot more lifting to do in the 5G arena when it comes to security and managing all of that. So a very important aspect that all of us need to make sure that we're up to speed with.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thanks, Mike. And I think from the survey, we're looking at well over 70% of participating MNOs planning to launch 5G standalone roaming. And as Sue and Mike just mentioned, the requirements, the requirements for migrating from 5G non-standalone to 5G standalone roaming evolution or network is different, and there are new signaling, there's new security functions, new billing and charging principles. Obviously, there are new use cases to be supported. I just quickly want to bring in Marco here and really to understand the perspective, maybe considering Swisscom's experience with all this. Marco, what needs to be done from an MNO perspective to be in a very competitive position within 5G roaming?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think we are in telecommunications and roaming. We are in the middle of a big transition. There's a lot of going on at the same time, as we heard from Mike and Sue. There are the phase outs, the VoLTE, 5G, M2M. And I think for 5G SA, we are just at the beginning, right? So it's about how to face the challenge best with the positive mindset and to do small steps, iterate and see what's the best roadmap and plan ahead. So it's really important that we start early to communicate also our goals and roadmap and then tackle those challenges. As Swisscom, we will focus on delivering a fully automated and cloud-based 5G solution. So of course, this takes time. We need to clarify the use cases and business cases. Of course, there is some uncertainty about slicing, quality, SLA. What are the possibilities there? I see definitely technology as an enabler. First, we need the technology, and then also the use cases will come. It's kind of not always in the same order, right? And yeah, of course, there's this unknown, what will be the new possibilities. So I think these are really exciting times, and yeah, looking forward to tackle those challenges.
Yeah, and you know, it's quite evident that all you know, 5G roaming in general means, you know, it will realize significant opportunities for enterprises as well as customers, and I think we've got some questions coming in on that as well, you know, around the advantages of 5G standalone, the use cases. We will come to that in a second, and we will touch upon these use cases and the advantages shortly. But I promised at the start that we will we will definitely discuss quality of service. You know, I think Sue mentioned it. And it's important to discuss that today as well, because even in the survey we saw well over 70% of the operators who took part expecting guaranteed quality of service and service assurance, and this is of at most an immediate requirement for them while launching 5G roaming. Even while we were at the most recently concluded VAS, you know, quality of service was an important topic, and I believe will be so in many more events to come. So it is becoming an important topic, and it is becoming extremely critical as roaming complexity increases. But my question is, do you believe that necessary steps are being taken by mobile operators to address this? And if not, is it important to do so? Let's start with Sue and see what your thoughts are on it.
Sorry, Nathan, it was breaking a bit. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so we're just talking about quality of service and how it's becoming important now.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted your thoughts on, you know, do you believe that operators around the world are taking necessary steps to address this?
I certainly think so. I saw, you know, we see a lot of operators are partnering up with cloud partners across the world, and even in testing, they're part of the API, you know, the Project Camara. They are actively testing the application development, all the way, you know, how the parameters are coming from the charging and going to another operators. And the considerations are like, you know, similarly local breakout or the regional breakout, what is necessity. The way I, you know, for example, I like analogies. So I'll give you one analogy where I think is like, if it's take a typical work to home commute, right? You're packed, it's there's a lot of traffic. But as soon as you see a fire truck or you see an ambulance, you don't know how that is moved, but everyone makes their way. So I feel the same way, you know, certain use cases, when you there are quality of services, quality of, you know, SLAs that are tied into these use cases, that enterprises are ready to pay, and 5G SAs unleashing all of those opportunities and use cases for various verticals, right? You see the same way, but how these translate from actually charging, you know, from the device all the way to your billing the customers, these things are like being worked on in the industry in various subgroups. But if you get the sense that, like, you know, that's how I think for sure operators are working on the trials, operators are working on the API, they are working with in Project Camara to make the network itself as a service offer, or infrastructure as a service for various applications.
Yeah, yeah. I'm super keen on bringing Tandria as well, because we had a discussion on this recently as well. How you know, ensuring all these service levels to meet the new use cases is of importance. Tandria, how do you see this? I mean, maybe from Telefónica's experience, you know, how do you see operators prioritizing customer experience management, and what must they focus on compared to, let's say, current practices, and how you are championing that at Telefonica?
Yes, Nitin. So I absolutely agree with you. I think that's a topic that that is being addressed already today by the operators. So the importance of this, of quality of service in the future use cases that will be enabled by 5G is absolutely relevant. And it's a topic that we are already addressing also in the conversations with the partners, how to deal with this topic in terms of ensuring and guaranteeing the quality of service when it comes to roaming. And so I see that we will go through a journey, let's call it like this, where we'll address the quality of service in the roaming agreements through SLOs. And once we have a deeper knowledge and understanding of the different requirements for the different use cases that we will enable in the future, will migrate to SLAs between operators in order to make or to ensure the quality of service in the service provision. So for sure, that's a key topic that we all are aware of, and it is in our conversations with the partners already now. So how do we need to address this? I think we have to take it from a global perspective. So we need to make sure that quality of service is enabled in each of the networks, but we also need to take into account how IPX providers are ensuring that this quality of service, these levels of quality, is enabled amongst end-to-end amongst the roaming partners. We also need to take into account how the mediation systems are able to transfer this information into the BCE reports. So therefore, I'm speaking of a global perspective that needs to be taken on this topic in order to really make it happen and to have an end-to-end insurance, when it comes to the customer experience. So that's how we approach it today, and I think so. Key is for sure that the industry is already looking at it, and operators are taking account of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be more discussions around this going forward, especially with regards to reporting capabilities and when you go towards network slices, how to guarantee those performances as well as security best practices. I'm going to continue this discussion and move it along because I'm very of time as well. So we cannot have any sort of 5G roaming discussions without mentioning BCE, the monetization models, as well as the immediate requirement of transitioning to VoLTE. So let's discuss BCE, and because one of our latest survey, I think one of the key findings was monetization of 5G roaming services was the #1 reason for mobile operators to migrate from TAP to BCE. So in a sense, BCE is a fundamental or prerequisite to 5G standalone roaming. So I want to discuss two angles on this. One, I'll bring you, Mike, in, and then maybe we could just discuss the context and the need for BCE firstly for our audience, and then we will discuss how successful or what can be done to accelerate this migration towards BCE later on. But Mike, firstly, what's the need for BCE?
Yeah, so BCE, billing and clearing evolution, is a concept that really is changing the way that traditionally clearing has been handled, which is kind of a larger time scale and very quite frankly inflexible. The idea behind BCE is really originally, I think, was focused more on IoT than really 5G, quite frankly. And the reason IoT becomes an issue is because of the various agreements that we need to support, and the different financial requirements or agreements that go behind IoT from both a services perspective as a customer of the mobile operator, as well as for roaming scenarios. We have many instances of permanent and semi-permanent roaming associated with the automotive industry, as an example. With regards to 5G, the industry has made a decision that TAP will no longer be supported as far as for future evolution. It's pretty much capped, and I think 5G, again, setting aside the thought process of human connected devices, really the 5G story is more about where the industry's headed with enterprise IoT, connecting everything else, and that is going to require some much more flexible capabilities that BCE represents with regards to financial management and clearing of data management. And that flexibility is key to the capabilities that BCE brings to the table. Now, there is some disagreement as to when this is all going to happen, because some operators are going to continue to invest in and continue using TAP. So there is going to be some interoperability needs in the industry, I think, that we see. And, that's fine. But eventually, as we move into 5G, IoT, and the use case will be driving, I think, the evolution, right? Those use cases that operators are going to see are of value for monetization are going to drive the decision, look, we got to make the investment to go to BCE. And I think that's what we're going to see. But this thing's going to be around. TAP's going to be around for several years to come, I think. It's not going away tomorrow. So,
And I think, Mike, you're right. And that's what we've seen over the recent months, that the migration towards BCE is kind of slow. And Marco, let me bring you in. What are the reasons for this? Maybe you could give Swisscom's view on this.
Yeah, sure. So Swisscom has launched and tested BC with several partners. Our main purpose was to monetize NB-IoT, for example, with the IMSI charging. So we go ahead with those commercial models. But it was also to be one of the first and to learn and to adapt, because you have to adapt the whole ecosystem, right? You need to have the proper interfaces, the reporting all in one place. So there are several steps. So I think therefore it's important to start early and to tackle it step by step. And if you outsource it, let's say it's not such a big thing to start, but of course then it's a big thing to migrate and to go ahead as the whole community. Exactly, that's the problem. Today, let's say the adoption was not as fast as maybe expected at the beginning. But I really hope we can encourage you to test there as well, and also do the first steps and then make those incremental changes. Because as we said earlier, there are a lot of changes ongoing. It's a big transition and you cannot do everything at the same time. So probably it's better to have BC already proper in place and then really roll out the 5G SA.
Yeah. And okay, now that we've covered BCE, I want to touch upon VoLTE. Again, VoLTE roaming support. You saw the survey findings that we had, the slides that we had. It's number one most immediate support needed for MNOs while transitioning to 5G roaming. So I believe this looks a good result for the industry as a whole. But Marco, coming back to you on VoLTE roaming, what do you think? Do we now have the attention of mobile operators? Do we see VoLTE roaming taking off at a much faster pace this year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think as we have seen in the USA, right? So no one is waiting for roaming, so the shutdowns will continue, of course. That's a much bigger picture, of course, and the bigger use case. But yeah, this really, let's say, get it started. Of course, we need more acceleration there, that we are faster, because it's really a short time, probably 2 or 3 years that we need now to really roll out a lot of partners, especially because there is no interoperability between 2G, 3G and voice over new radio, sorry. And of course, VoLTE is the clear path to 5G. So also here, it's important to have a clear roadmap for your transition to VoLTE, to communicate it early, especially also for your partners.
Yeah.
And then make it as simple as possible, charge it as data, and of course, focus on the customer experience, because that's the most important, that we have the best coverage and best experience. Probably also with steering solutions for VoLTE.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and completely agree, Marco. And guys, it is not every day that you get a wonderful, fantastic panel like this. I'm going to steal 5 more minutes of your time and keep this discussion going. We may not have time to do the Q&A session, but we'll definitely get back to you guys, get back in touch with you guys after this session. But I'm going to keep this panel going on for another 5 minutes, because as I mentioned earlier on, we need to touch upon the use cases. And we keep saying it's not about just the consumer use cases, but roaming remains a critical tool to support IoT connectivity. And we know 5G connectivity offers significantly more potential for international M2M services. But I think one thing to discuss again here is that despite all these opportunities and despite all the the positive talks, I think there are significant challenges that remain in the industry. So, Tandria, maybe let's have a quick discussion on how you or how Telefonica is addressing this complexity in terms of international M2M use cases when looking to deploy IoT connections on a global scale.
Yes. So, as any new business, this comes also with complexities, and here we are in the same situation, I would say. No, so in this case, we're finding ourselves first in a situation where, well, there's no common understanding of what should be considered IoT. So what is the definition of IoT? And this, of course, brings complexity in the sense of how do we treat this from a commercial perspective, this traffic. On top of this, there are also other complexities to this scaling, like the regulatory constraints that we find in certain countries for example, the permanent roaming definition and restrictions that we're finding now in some countries. That's another difficulty that we're finding, and we also need to address quality of service concerns that are relevant to IoT. And so these are complexities that we need to deal with as an industry in order to take care and to enable the machine to machine on 5G. And but definitely, I think there is no doubt that roaming is a key enabler to this opportunity and new revenue stream.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And as we saw from the survey, there is a demand for low latency use cases, and we will see this eventually driving revenues for service providers. So we understand there needs to be discussion on these use cases. We need to outline what these use cases are. So Mike, I'm going to bring you in back for giving some closing comments on this discussion. But so in reality, when it comes to international roaming services for IoT connections, where are we, and when do you see these use cases being realized? But the opportunity is there, but when do you see this opportunity being realized?
Well, I would almost challenge to say that the opportunity is now. Not because of 5G necessarily, but because it's already happening, right? So if the promise of 5G holds true, which is expanding those use cases outside of the traditional roaming scenarios, including M2M. I still use that too, Tandria, M2M. That kind of fell out of favor for some reason, but with IoT. But I think we need to be ready to understand where these verticals are going. Today, the automotive industry is one of the largest drivers for IoT mobility. And Tandria mentioned regulatory concerns, right? We're facing those today. So these are the same challenges that we're going to see with 5G, but I think that because of the use cases being multiplied, due to the additional verticals that the mobile operators are going to penetrate, it's only going to get more complex. And I think we need to start thinking about how we better manage IoT from a mobility perspective. What are some of those future use cases that we see coming based on our experience so far? So I think we've already saw it with 4G, and I think 5G is just going to increase the volume and the use cases that we're going to need to be prepared for.
Yeah.
Then I want to add one last point on the IoT.
Sure.
Just in a couple of weeks ago in the GSMNA North America, we reviewed the BA 48 that defines how operators should define and be transparent. How do they identify M2M traffic for repayments, operators? So that'll be a good thing to go back and review for folks who want to again deep dive into this topic.
There you go. There you go.
Very good.
Thank you, guys. I think we have had an excellent discussion today, and I'm sure we can continue for another couple of hours on 5G roaming and the related opportunities and challenges. But I think we must wrap up now because we did overrun a bit, but I'm pretty sure that was well worth everyone's time. So I'm going to wrap this up and hand over to John. John, you still there? There you go. And thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nitin. I have enjoyed so much listening to all of the discussion points, and
yes.
I hope the audience have really enjoyed it as well. For those of you who have asked your questions, and there have been a few, we will be following up with you directly afterwards, so don't worry, and thank you so much for engaging and submitting your questions. A reminder to everyone that the latest insights are now available to you. So you'll receive an email from us following this webinar with the direct link where you can download the white paper. This webinar replay will be available shortly as well. So let's draw it to a close there. Thank you everyone for attending, and no doubt we will see you again soon. And to all of our panelists, thank you all so much. That was fantastic, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We did too. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Take care then, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.